Hey, welcome back to our Mr. Stink adventures. Chapter 17, Collapsed Bouffant. Now, do you know what a bouffant is? It's like a certain hairstyle. I suppose it's a little bit like this. Just nice, big little hairstyle you got going on. And that's why I feel that there should be a curfew on all people under 30. Mother was in full flow now, and she smiled as she received a smattering of applause for this comment from the people over 30 in the audience. They should all be in bed by 8 o'clock at the latest. Sorry, I was a while, said Mr. Stink as he ambled back onto the set. I thought it was just the number one, but while I was standing there, I suddenly got the urge to do a number two. The audience erupted with laughter, some even applauding in delight as this serious show descended into a discussion of old tramps' toilet habits. I mean, I usually do my number twos in the mornings between 9:07 and 9:08, but I had an egg sandwich backstage before I came on the show tonight. I don't know if you made the sandwiches, Sir Derek. No, I don't make the sandwiches, Mr. Stink. Now, please, can we get back to the question of curfews for young? Well, it was a delicious sandwich, don't get me wrong, but egg can sometimes make me want to go. And I don't always get that much of a warning, especially at my age. Do you have that problem, Sir Doris? Or do you have the bum of a much younger man? Another massive wave of laughter crashed onto the stage. In the stale, crisp room, even Annabelle was laughing now. We're here to discuss the serious topics of the day, Mr. Stink, continued Sir David. His face was redder than red with anger at his serious political program. A program he had presented for 40 tedious years was rapidly turning into a comedy show starring an old tramp. The audience was enjoying it immensely though, and booed Sir David a little as he tried to steer the show back to politics. He shot them a mysterious stare before turning to the new star of the show. And my name is Sir David, not Sir Derek or Sir Doris, Sir David. Now let's move on to the question of homelessness. Mr. Stink, I have a statistic here which says that there are over 100,000 homeless people in the UK today. Why do you think so many people are living on the streets? Mr. Stink cleared his throat a little. Well, if I may be so bold, I would venture that part of the problem stems from the fact that we are seen as statistics rather than people. The audience applauded and Sir David leaned forward with interest. Perhaps Mr. Stink wasn't the clan he had taken him for. We all have different reasons for being homeless. Each homeless person has a different story to tell. Perhaps if people in the audience tonight or out there watching at home stopped to talk to the homeless people in their town, they would realise that. The audience were applauding even louder now, but Mrs. Crumb leaped in. That's what I did. I just stopped to talk to this tramp one day and then asked him to come and live with my family. I've always put others before myself. I suppose that's always been my downfall, she said, tilting her head to the side and smiling at the audience as if she were an angel sent down from heaven. Well, that's not really true, is it, Mrs. Crumb? Said Mr. Stink. There was silence. Mother stared at Mr. Stink in horror. The audience shifted excitedly in their seats. Dad, Annabelle and Chloe all leaned forward closer to the television. Even Sir David's moustache twitched in anticipation. I don't know what you mean. My very close friend, squirmed Mrs. Crumb. I think you do. The fact is it wasn't you who invited me in, was it? Sir David's eyes gleamed. Then who did invite you to stay in the Crumb family, Mr. Stink? He inquired, back in his stride now. Mrs. Crumb's daughter, Chloe. She's only 12 and she's an absolutely fantastic girl. One of the sweetest, kindest people I have ever met. These words fell on Chloe like an enormous yes. Then everyone in the stale, crisp room looked towards her and she was overcome with embarrassment. She hid her face in her hands. Dad stroked her back proudly. Annabelle pretended not to be interested, and helped herself to another stale crisp. "She should really come out here and take a bow," announced Mr. Stink. "No, no, no," snapped Mother. "No, Mrs. Crumb," said Sir David. "I think we'd all like to meet this extraordinary little girl." The audience applauded his suggestion, but Chloe felt glued to her seat. She couldn't even speak loud in front of the class. She didn't want to be on television in front of millions of people. What would she say? What would she do? She didn't know any tricks. This was going to be the most embarrassing moment of her life. Even worse than when she threw up her macaroni and cheese all over Miss Spratt in the language lab. But the applause was getting louder and louder, and eventually Dad took her hand and gently pulled her to her feet. "You're feeling shy, aren't you?" Dad whispered. Chloe nodded. "Well, you shouldn't. You're a fantastic girl. You should be proud of what you've done. Now come on, enjoy your moment in the limelight." Hand in hand, they raced down to the corridor towards the set. Just out of sight of the cameras, Dad let her hand go and smiled supportively as she stepped out into the light. The audience applauded wildly. Mr. Stink beamed over at her, and she tried to beam back. Mother was the only person not applauding, so Chloe's eyes were drawn towards her. Chloe tried to meet her gaze, but Mother turned her head sharply to look the other way. This made Chloe even more uncomfortable, and she tried to do a curtsy, but she didn't really know how to, and then ran off the stage back to the safety of the stale crisp room. "What a charming child," said David. He turned to the mother. "Now I have to ask you, Mrs. Crumb, why did you lie? Was it purely to further your own political ambitions?" The other guests from rival political parties looked at Mrs. Crumb and tutted, as if they would ever dream of doing anything so immoral. "Oh, please." Mother started to perspire. Her hair lacquer began to melt, and her makeup ran slowly down her face. Dad, Chloe, and Annabelle sat and watched her squirm, unable to help. "Well, as if anyone would want that old tramp in their house," she shouted finally. "Look at him. You look, watching this at home can't smell him, but take it from me, he stinks. He stinks of dirt and sweat and poo and pond and dog. I wish that great stinky stinker would just stink off out of my home forever." There was shocked silence for a moment. Then the boos started getting louder. The boos started getting louder and louder. Mother looked at the audience in panic. At that moment, her bouffant collapsed. Oh my goodness. Here we are. Look forward to the next chapter.